In 2014, dozens of police officers raided a farm in search of a missing man last seen in that area. Unbeknownst to them, they were about to uncover a shocking crime unlike anything they had encountered before, facing a killer who disposed of their victims in an unimaginable way, a method so horrific that even the devil himself might not have conceived it. The events began on January 1, 2014, when the sons of a man named Robert Haney gathered in Medford, a region in an American state, after losing contact with their father for several months. They went to the area where their father had been living to search for him, knowing he worked for a woman named Susan Monica, assisting her with manual labor in exchange for living on her farm. When they asked Susan about their father, she claimed she hadn't seen him in 4 months. However, they were shocked to find many of their father's belongings in his trailer, including his car, bicycle, clothes, leather jackets, tools he used for work, and even his dog. The sons found it strange that their father would leave everything behind if he had departed, sensing something was terribly wrong. They immediately decided to report the matter to the police. At the police station, officers asked questions about Robert's past, his circumstances, and how he ended up in that place. They learned that Robert Haney was a construction worker. In 2003, he divorced his wife after having 5 children, gaining custody of them in that region. As the children grew up, each established their own life and left home. In 2012, Robert decided to sell his house and live more freely. He bought a trailer, a car, and a bicycle, moving from place to place, living in nature among trees and open spaces, which he loved. However, he remained in the Medford area. In early 2013, he saw a job advertisement posted by Susan Monica, the farm owner, seeking help with manual labor in exchange for a small monthly payment. Robert contacted her, saying he didn't want money, but only permission to live on her land by parking his trailer there in return for assisting with manual tasks. He helped her with everything she needed: carpentry, blacksmithing, plumbing, and moving items. During this period, Robert stayed in touch with his children, though communication was weak and sometimes interrupted for long periods. After 2 months of being unable to reach him, his children decided to look for him. They first approached Susan, then went to the police. After hearing the story, the police determined their first step was to question Susan, as she was likely the last person to see Robert. Before doing so, they researched her background to learn more about her. They discovered that Susan was 64 years old and had previously served in the Navy. In 1991, she purchased a large, isolated piece of land, the same land she lived on now. It appeared she wanted a quiet life away from the city. Initially, she built a small cabin on her property without electricity or plumbing. She decided to develop the land into an animal farm, planning to build a warehouse, a barn, and other structures. She began working on it herself, but soon realized the task was too demanding, so she hired people to help. Over the years, she employed several individuals for manual labor, but none stayed long. The longest lasted about a year before leaving, as the job was not sustainable. In 2013, she posted a job ad in a nearby town, which Robert responded to, working with her for about 6 months until he disappeared in September 2013. The police knew tracking someone like Robert would be challenging. He had no fixed address, conducted all transactions in cash without using bank accounts or cards, and lived in isolation away from people. They asked Robert's children if they noticed anything unusual about their father before his disappearance. The eldest son reported that months before his father vanished, he received news of an assault on his daughter, which left him deeply angry and distressed, with a strong desire for revenge. However, he was unable to act, as they didn't know the perpetrator's identity. Afterward, their father fell into depression and began drinking heavily, leading to his disappearance. The investigators considered this might be related to his vanishing. After gathering information, a detective and an investigator went to Susan's farm to question her. Upon entering the farm, they were stunned by the scene. Chaos reigned, with items and objects scattered everywhere, buildings half constructed or mere skeletons, and piles of scrap and garbage in every corner. The detective described the place as resembling a horror movie set or a post-apocalyptic series. As soon as they parked their car, they saw Susan approaching. She appeared highly cooperative, friendly, and eager to help them find Robert. She told them Robert worked with her for about 6 months, and their agreement was that he would assist with manual labor in exchange for living on her land. Things went well for a while, but everything changed after Robert received a phone call, likely from a family member, delivering bad news. From then on, Robert changed drastically, drinking heavily and becoming difficult to deal with. The investigators confirmed this was likely the call from his daughter about the assault on her sister. They asked Susan to describe Robert's condition before he disappeared. She said his mental state deteriorated day by day after the call. At night, she sometimes heard him shouting and talking to himself in his trailer, saying things like, why, God?" She decided to confront him to persuade him to stop drinking excessively, as dealing with him had become unbearable. However, before she could speak to him, he suddenly vanished on September 9, 2013, and the police couldn't find any details about a car or a precise description. They contacted homeless shelters and hospitals to check if anyone matching Robert's description had visited, but the responses were always negative. During the investigation, the police discovered Robert had an EBT card, a social assistance card used for discounts when shopping. Upon checking the system, they found the card was used in December 2013, 2 months after Robert's disappearance, at a Walmart branch in town. Expecting to see Robert in the surveillance footage, they were shocked to see Susan using the card. They quickly obtained a search warrant for Susan's farm and properties, and a team of 5 or 6 officers went to search the farm on January 10, 2014. When confronted about the card, Susan showed signs of nervousness, but quickly composed herself, claiming Robert gave her the card to buy food for his dog, which he left in her care. The investigators told her they had a search warrant and would inspect the entire property. The police spread out and began searching every corner. The place was a dump, with a strong, foul odor permeating the air, and piles of scrap and garbage stacked everywhere. There was no sewage system or running water, and a pig pen made the smell even worse. During the search, an officer filming with a video camera noticed something on the ground. Upon closer inspection, he realized it was a severed human leg. He immediately called the investigators, who confirmed after examination that it was indeed a human leg. Susan was arrested on the spot and taken to the police station for questioning. In the interrogation room, the investigators confronted Susan directly with the evidence. She changed her story, claiming she found her pigs gathered around something they were eating. When she approached, she realized it was Robert, lying on the ground with his entrails exposed, still alive, as she saw his hand move and heard a faint sound. Instead of shooting the pigs or calling for help, she decided to end his life, claiming it was an act of mercy, likening it to killing sick pigs to end their suffering. She said she removed his clothes to make it easier for the pigs to eat him, leaving him there for days until the pigs consumed the body. She then collected the remains, placed them in garbage bags, and threw them behind the barn. It's likely an animal smelled the bags, tore one open, and dragged Robert's leg to where the police found it. The police were horrified by the story, believing it might be the first time a killer disposed of victims in such a manner. They asked why she didn't call the police or shoot the pigs instead of the human. She replied that she feared the pigs would be deemed dangerous, leading authorities to kill them. She spoke of her pigs with affection and empathy, but her tone was chillingly cold when discussing Robert being eaten alive by her pigs and her shooting him. The investigators realized they were dealing with a ruthless and mentally disturbed individual. The lead investigator suspected this wasn't her first killing, as her coldness suggested someone accustomed to murder. They asked if they would find anything else on the farm. Susan showed intense signs of anxiety and struggled to speak coherently. Eventually, she requested paper and a pen, drew a map of her pig pen, and marked an X on a specific spot, saying they would find something worse there. When asked what they would find, she said they would discover another person's remains. She explained that Robert wasn't the first to help her on the farm or die there. She told them about a man who worked with her before Robert, named Steve Delacino, who lived on a nearby farm. She met him in 2012 through a job ad. She described Steve as kind and helpful, assisting with everything she needed. However, in the summer of 2012, she noticed 2 of her weapons were missing and suspected Steve, as he was the only one visiting her farm. She searched his belongings secretly and found the weapons, then confronted him. The verbal argument escalated into a physical altercation. Susan, carrying a handgun, accidentally fired a shot that hit Steve in the head, but it wasn't fatal, grazing the side of his head. He tried to stand as blood poured from his wound. Frightened, Susan fled, and Steve chased her, attempting to grab her. She ran to the barn door, where she grabbed a rifle and aimed it at him. Despite his injury, Steve tried to hold on to her, collapsing to his knees. According to her account, she left him there. When she returned later, she found her pigs eating his body. She left the body with the pigs for 2 weeks until they consumed it, leaving only bones, which she buried in a pit behind the barn. The investigators asked why she didn't report it to the police if it was self-defense. She repeated that she feared authorities would kill her pigs. When asked if there were more victims, she looked at them and said she had nothing more to say. The investigators feared they were dealing with a serial killer. On the 11th of January, 2014, dozens of police officers and forensic experts descended on the farm to search it thoroughly. They found Robert's remains immediately and used an excavator to retrieve Steve's remains. The scattered items were bizarre, including a room filled with personal belongings, furniture, TVs, shoes piled near the pig pen, as if belonging to many people, not just two. The piles of shoes raised questions about other victims. The search continued for days, with extensive digging, but no evidence of additional victims was found. After her arrest, Susan remained in jail for over a year, awaiting trial. The trial began in April 2015. Her lawyers argued that she killed Robert out of mercy and Steve in self-defense, and her only mistake was not reporting the incidents. However, the prosecution presented a surprise witness, Susan's cellmate, Jordan Ferris. She testified that Susan showed no remorse, recounting the events with glee, sometimes laughing, and calling herself Jackson County's criminal. She also mentioned Susan occasionally hinted at 17 other victims, though it was unclear if she was joking or serious. This raised the possibility that Susan was a serial killer who lured victims with job offers and fed them to her pigs. Ultimately, no definitive evidence of other victims beyond Robert and Steve was found. Susan was convicted of both murders and sentenced to life in prison.